Okay, hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webinar, Navigating the Skill Gap Disruption, Elevating the Power of Digital Credentialing. My name is Kevin Hogan. I am the Content Director for eSchool News, and I'm happy you are joining us today for what I know will be a very insightful and important conversation. This event is being brought to you by Instructure. Instructure, the maker of Canvas LMS, is a leading education technology company dedicated to elevating student success, amplifying the power of teaching, and inspiring everyone to learn together. The Instructure learning ecosystem, comprised of several products serving K-12, higher ed, and professional education, supports tens of millions of educators and learners worldwide, making learning more personal and student success more equitable. You can learn more at www.instructure.com. Now, before we get into our conversation, I'd like to take a minute to go over some of the features of the platform that we're using for this webinar. The event is being recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing anything. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. Now, if you have a question or comment during the presentation, there is a Q&A function at the bottom that you can launch. Feel free to use this feature to contact someone from eSchool News if you have a technical question as well. So with these housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started with our conversation and some introductions. First, we have Michael Yakubov. Michael is currently a senior account manager at Instructure, working with over 200 institutions in the New England, New York, Delaware, Washington, D.C., and New Jersey regions. He's helping to establish best EdTech practices and resource planning for academic success. Prior to joining Instructure, Michael spent 12 years in higher education as an assistant director of admissions, executive director of a business school, and with enrollment management and dean of enrollment management and strategy. Spanning experience at small liberal institutions, mid-sized state universities, and community college settings has helped Michael align the values coveted by institutions when evaluating digital tools for student and faculty success. Moreover, Michael possesses a doctorate of education from Wilmington University, focusing his dissertation on institutional closures and fiscal resource planning. Unfortunately, Michael, a hot topic these days. Outside of higher education, Michael owns a small consulting company called the Resumaniacs, where he provides services in career empowerment and quality HR practices. I won't ask you what you do after lunch, Michael. That's quite a number of things you've got going on there. Also, we have Jason Gildner. Jason is a principal global lead for lifelong learning, working in the Center of Excellence at Instructure. Jason is passionate about transforming the way people use technology, working to connect product development with thought leadership, marketing, and sales. After spending 12 years at higher education institutions, in learning management, instructional design areas, and classroom technology, he jumped in with both feet into the EdTech space, working for Echo 360, which is a leader in the lecture capture space. Jason managed existing customers and ensured that they were hitting their strategic goals. As a principal global lead for lifelong learning, Jason pushes for innovation in his space by ensuring that individuals can advocate for themselves meaningfully regarding their lifestyle. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to hearing about your insights and ideas on what is, a really hot topic right now. Digital credentials really are in this process that's going from what I would say was an evolution into kind of just an acceleration. I think probably the pandemic had something to do with that. I also think the comfort that both students and faculty now are becoming with these ideas certainly is a zeitgeist. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to you guys. You are obviously in the cockpit and ready to go.
Oh boy, Kevin, thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. I'm Michael, one of your co-pilots today, and you've just been introduced to Jason Gildner, my colleague. Jason and I have been working together for a good part, over a year and a half now, we built a great collaboration. And one of the things that we hear a lot about is credentialing. We talk a lot about credentialing with institutions all across the country, really trying to paint the picture of why it's relevant. And we hope that today we'll be able to kind of showcase a little bit about the value of this concept of navigating the skills gap disruption. What does that actually mean? How do we evaluate that in the higher education sphere, and then actually take that into some form of action? So without further ado, what I'd like to do is we've offered a QR code here. If you have your phone handy, grab it, scan it. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. We kind of did a little of a mapping sequence here. Jason's also going to post the link to, if you don't have your phone handy, a link so you can navigate to and join, kind of just put your initial and share where you are in the world or the institution that you're representing. But as we continue on, I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds to do that here. But as we continue on, we're going to just really walk you through 5 really key pieces. I hope everyone's been able to capture this the best they can. But the things that we're really going to focus on here are going to be on shifting gears in the market. So we're going to highlight what's happening in industry today. We're going to talk about how students can advocate for themselves and how we empower them to do that as institutions. We have to share, and we want to share with you about what is it that institutions get out of this? What is the value? How do you retain student success? How do you build on the bedrock of what you already built out in your academic programs and offerings? What's next in the market? Sky's the limit. And then finally kind of close us out with what's happening in the flow of technology, the evolution of credentialing and badging, and how do you keep up, right? You've done all this great work. How do you keep up in the market? So we're throwing a lot of QR codes at you. Here's another one. If you want to just tell us kind of where you are in the world of your credentialing journey. Maybe you haven't started at all. Maybe you have.
Michael, we're getting a ton of results already, and
awesome.
The vast majority is in the early planning phase, right? Over 44% of our audience today is in the early planning phase. We've got about 28% that haven't started. Breaking it down, we've got about 16% that have already launched a program and 12% that have a committee and they're kind of reviewing their options. So it's a good spread across the board.
Awesome. That's great. So we appreciate that. That's going to help us kind of navigate how we want to present our presentation to you today. So I'm just going to kick us off, right? I just said to you, there's like a lot of conversation around credentialing, and there is. It's not just about the idea of credentialing. Credentialing, stackable credentials has been around for over a decade, if not more. Guided pathways have been around for about 15 years. There's so much knowledge out there, but industry continues to shift and continues to change. And the paradigm of what's happening in higher education pre and post the pandemic has drastically shifted. One way that has happened has been a huge emphasis on adult learners. Before the pandemic, institutions were actually looking to sundown a lot of their continuing education programs and initiatives. Post the pandemic, it's been the boom that has been pushing and pulling institutions across the finish line, both fiscally and the amount of learner demand that they're receiving. And so you can kind of see by some of the articles that are out there, some of the headlines that we're sharing with you, credentialing is a big factor in that process. How do we validate the value that somebody is achieving? And then from a standard kind of perspective globally and nationally, the U.S. Department of Education is really focused on continuing learning and access. And so we want to be able to highlight these things because news continues to evolve in that sphere. One of the biggest factors that has impacted that change has been none other than the emergence of AI, right? You probably have all sat in on a webinar about AI and thinking about how does AI help students maybe get an advantage in a classroom. But AI has so many different capabilities, particularly in the workforce. It's changing the way students are learning. It's changing the way employers are hiring. It's changing the type of jobs that are out there in the market. You could see some of the statistics, the Future of Jobs report. That was from 2020. And even then they predicted that 85 million jobs will be replaced by AI by 2025. I would think that number is probably higher. And the skill set that's required for those careers and jobs is elevating and changing every single day. Just kind of mapping out where we are in the world today, we really are now hitting that stride of a third industrial revolution. And that is technology, right? And what's really interesting is that we're seeing a big shift away from just supporting traditional college degrees with a much greater emphasis on skills and the recognition of those skills for varied audiences, particularly those in adult learners, right? This staggering statistic when I saw it, 36 million adult learners with 25 years or older have some college degree, probably a ton of skills. They just may not be able to showcase those skills in some way, shape, or form. Institutions need to be there to help fill that void. The credentialing market is shifting. Tech companies, by and large, are taking the lead and recognizing skills that can be validated. And we know that the pandemic, if it did one thing, is that it really elevated everyone to get up to speed on online learning and delivery. And so at least 20% of students have taken or are currently taking one online course. And so all those things put together, we wanted to kind of paint the picture for you. The market is shifting, it's continuing to elevate. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jason, to walk us down the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So I think we're all feeling this this graph, which is that there is a decline in traditional enrollments, and we're seeing it across 2-year and 4-year. And it's happened basically right around 2012 and onward. We're starting to really see that. But the other trend that we're starting to see is a rise in the non-degree credentials. And so if you look at this chart, and you can see there is a very sharp increase in that non-degree credential aspect of folks' life, just like Michael was talking about, as folks are kind of figuring out where they are in their lifelong learning journey, they are figuring out that not everybody needs to have a degree to be successful. So they are seeking other options here. And it's pretty staggering when you think about that there's literally 11% projected increase in that non-traditional space already. And it's really just, I think the sky's the limit to take from our earlier slide of the agenda. I really do see this space exploding. So Michael, if you want to go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about really what we're seeing here, this breakdown of kind of the adult learners and the transfer. So we're seeing a shift toward reskilling. We're seeing adult learners, alumni, corporate audiences. They're all kind of in this lifelong learning journey together and in a professional development setting. That's why you're seeing that top bar, those top couple of bars all kind of dominating this chart. The overall results are reflected, right? There is a need for us to evolve and a changing workforce. So that's what this graph is really showing us. And these are the different breakdowns of the areas that we're seeing those areas really, really affect immediately. So, Michael, I'll pass it back to you unless you have something else you'd like to chat
No,
about.
I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Our audience is changing. The other thing that's changing, and this is something that was very interesting coming across this study by NACE, employers are actually, so this was a study done by Higher Education by NACE on employer feedback. And it used to be what we mentioned before, right? You graduate, we used to all put our GPA in our resume, 4.0, Dean's List, 3.8, whatever your GPA was. And that was kind of the benchmark that we used. And now we're seeing that employers are valuing that a little bit less because they realize that we all come from different backgrounds, different abilities and skills, and that there are factors, variables that impact how well we may be able to perform on a test or a metric like that. And instead, value is being placed into significantly more into skills. And then the question becomes, and you kind of see these skills broken down, but the question becomes, how do you now advocate for yourself and all these skills that you've achieved to help the employer realize that I'm great at doing a presentation or I'm not great at doing a presentation, something of that nature. And so looking at kind of the results here, employers are looking for things like work ethic, written communication skills, right? Those soft skills, in addition to those technical skills that you have. But students need a path and a way to be able to advocate for their success. And so when we look at this research and then it's further validated, employers want to see their own employees kind of continue to accrue credentialing, be able to validate those skills. 76% said pursuing micro-credentials demonstrates an employee's willingness to develop their own skills. So its growth potential is in there. And then 80% of respondents said their stackable credentials leading to a degree enhance their appeal, right? It's being marketable, this whole concept of marketability. And so it's being validated by industry. being supported by higher education. There's definitely a marriage between the two. And I'll turn it over to Jason for the next piece.
Yeah, and before we dive into that next slide, I think it's important, right? Like Michael was talking about these soft skills and this, think about the emotional intelligence that someone has. How do you adequately put emotional intelligence on a resume in a meaningful way? Well, partially you can do that with a digital credential, but there's so many other ways in which employers are looking to kind of get this information, and how do we bring it to the surface, because it's kind of buried right now and it takes quite a lot for someone to actually get down and into the details of what someone actually knows. And as we're going to get into the digital backpack realm here a little bit later in the presentation, we'll talk about how that application happens. But really, we're at this point where we want students to be able to have a learning journey and demonstrate achievements and provide verifiable, portable credentials in a meaningful way. And so that's what we're looking to do, is give them a launch pad to be successful. And so if you think about, Michael, and you can feel free to go to the next slide, but if you think about someone that's going for a job interview, right? We've all been in this situation where we've been on hiring committees. Somebody is kind of talking about the skills that they have, or if you're reading their resume, right? You see bullet points listed out. I have all of these types of skills. And it's great that they can self-advocate for themselves in that way, but how can that have a little bit more power to it? So in the first example, what we're going to do is just play you a clip that demonstrates what it might sound like if someone didn't have a digital credential. And Michael, go ahead and play this clip.
Good day, my name is Lauren Wright. I recently completed and won a flight competition at my school. It was an elevated experience, to say the least. I am now working on building my own airplane. I am sure it will fly, as I have completed over 50 hours of flying at my institution. I have also won several awards for creative plan design. As a future pilot, I would love to work for your airline. My team has elected me as team captain for our upcoming flying venture competitions, and I have already passed the aviation exam with flying colors.
Right. So we can take Lauren at his word, right? And kudos to Michael for really incorporating that into the aviation theme. You guys can Google Lauren's name later on and figure out how he dropped that Easter egg in there. But when you're talking with someone, they're kind of taking you at face value, or they have to take you at face value, because some of the things that were in there, there's not a representation necessarily for, versus going into this next example where we have someone that has a little bit more power behind what they're saying with a verifiable credential. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I am a graduate from the Flight Academy. I earned my degree in aviation and also several accommodations. Firstly, I have completed the National Standard Exam for Pilots Level 3. I have also finished over 100 hours of flight training and obtained my emergency landing certificate.
Right. So there's some actual weight behind what she's saying, right? And Michael, if you go to the next slide.
Hi, my name is Lisa.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. So, there's a lot of digital backpacks out there. Canvas Credentials has a digital backpack as well, but it's really a way for someone to curate and have all of their credentials in one place that they can easily share out and make sure that they can do exactly what we're talking about, right? They can demonstrate in a verifiable way that they have the skills that this particular employer might be looking for, instead of it just leaving it up to some bullet points on a page. These are backed, right? And further, these digital credentials, if you're thinking about, well, what is the user going to do with these besides send them to an employer? Michael, if you go, yeah. So if we're talking about brand, kind of your brand, right? Your organizational brand, you're building a digital currency with these credentials. So your credentials are going out into the world via LinkedIn. They're going to all the different social media platforms that folks are sharing them to. And so every single time that happens, someone else is clicking on. I did it this morning. Someone got an Adobe credential that was in my network. And I was like, oh, where did they get that from? What did they have to do to complete it? And they had to do like 3 hours worth of training to get that certificate. So it was really interesting to me. It drew me in, right? It's a way for for others to have access to on-ramps to finding different things that they might be interested in learning about. So it's really important as an organization to think about what digital credentials can do for your organization from a brand and marketing standpoint. A lot of you are in the early planning phase, as we talked about. That's something to not overlook, is how impactful these could be when you think about the metadata inside these credentials and being able to point them back to courses, right? So if Michael posts his aviation badge on LinkedIn, somebody else could click on it and it would have in the metadata a link to register for the same course that Michael just completed, right? So you're completing this circle of kind of being able to use it as a marketing and enrollment tool all at one time.
Thanks, Jason. All right, so we have one last QR code for you, at least one where we're asking you to be interactive with us. Jason will drop the link as well. We want to kind of get a little bit more of a sense of how are you thinking about your credentialing journey, right? For us, we want to make sure that we're talking about the things that are relevant to higher education today. So go ahead and scan it. We'll kind of, in one word, help us describe how you feel about credentialing in general. Jason will give it just a little bit of time.
Yeah, we're getting quite a few entries. We got retention, engaged, outcomes, proof, evolving, employability, ambassadors, branding, credibility.
I love that.
Validation. This is awesome. This is like a live word cloud that's just
and we'll show it at the end of this presentation. We could show it as well. This is interesting because we didn't know what to expect, right? If we're going to have some synergy between the way the thought process works about what the value is. And we appreciate all of you kind of interacting with us in this way today.
Yeah, it looks like credibility seems to be a biggie on this.
That's a big one. Yeah. So. Well, let's talk a little bit about student success. And what I mean by that is, what is it that is the benefit to institutions? Why are institutions transitioning and looking at credentials as a solution, not just to reflect and respond to the market, but really to help meet the students where they need to be, right? And we know, I think that you're all aware on this call, that the enrollment cliff is here. It's not coming, it's here, right? 2026 is not that far away. Birth rates are down. But it also means that students are changing. The demographics of students are changing. The type of student and learner that we have is changing. There's so many different variables out there that we need to be able to point to and say, okay, what is the factor of why there's such a shift in enrollment? And we've seen a downturn, but we've also seen a switch in the type of learner. We want to be acknowledging of that. As institutions, we want to prepare for that. We want to be able to kind of build value into the different type of programming that you have. No longer do we live in this world of, I'm going to build an academic program and students are going to come, right? You have to validate, you have to connect from point A of, here's the degree, by the time somebody completes that certificate or degree, this is the career that they're going to land on. And that kind of potential keeps moving, right? It's a moving target, so to speak. You have to adapt to the market. And so retention is a big factor for institutions on top of the changing enrollment, because you want to know, am I serving my students correctly? Are students following the path of learning, that learning journey I've created for them? Can I identify students that are at risk? Our Canvas credential solution, which is our platform, our credentialing platform at Instructure, has this pathway integrated within that solution. And one of the really great pieces, and I'll let Jason add to this in a second, really great pieces is that it provides a full line of sight and visibility for students, for faculty, for administrators, and for future employers if they want to share it with them. But it's a guided path of learning, and it's that journey that's either connected to a course or it could also be connected to an initiative at your institution. Maybe you have a career development initiative while somebody is at your institution. So a pathway like this, as you probably are familiar with the workflow, is going to be something that you can lean on to help with retention building. Jason, you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is when you hear stackable out in the world of credentials, it doesn't get any more stackable than this. This is the kind of the shining star of stackable credentials. You're able to really paint that picture and provide them with a map from A to B of how they can get there. it also taps into human psychology, right? We use pathways every day. We just don't even think about them in terms of pathways. We use GPSs that guide us along a journey, and we follow it no matter if it tells us to turn away we've never been before. We still follow it because it's guiding us, right? We're shopping online all the time, and we're getting these little bars at the top to tell us where we are in our checkout journey. Students that can see where they are in their progression through their coursework, they are infinitely more apt of staying in that program and locked in, and they are kind of dialed in to the point of, hey, I'm 80% through, I'm going to go ahead and complete this. The other thing I want to just talk about a little bit, because this is a very unique differentiator in the market, is we have pathway opportunities. And so this is something that allows for students to be on one pathway, earn a few badges, and we can actually recommend to say, hey, Michael, did you know that because you took this leadership and you earned this leadership credential, you're eligible to be put onto this other pathway that has leadership incorporated in it, and it can take you down a completely other kind of route, right? And so what it does is it just keeps the learner coming back for more, and really starts to tie co-curricular type activity on campus together in a meaningful way. What Michael's showing here is really one of the major benefits to the actual organization, right? It's great. We want to provide credentialing as a means to make students' lives easier and for them to advocate for themselves, as we've mentioned. But it's nice to have something on the back end for the organizations, and that is being able to showcase ROI, being able to say, hey, not only did we issue these credentials, students are actually using these things. They're sending them out into the world. They're sending them to all these different social media platforms. So you can actually get a full line of sight to say, yeah, our brand is out there in the world, and people are going to find us because of all of this rich analytics and kind of posting metrics that you're seeing here. And you can kind of carve up the data however you like here, but this is a huge win for everybody to be able to see where this the credentialing metrics are.
Yeah, and Jason, do you want to speak about kind of another value that maybe sometimes is kind of the unsung hero in higher education, right? We talked so much right now about how do we support students, how do institutions build value to support learners, but there's another aspect to badging that perhaps can be a wrinkle that institutions are using this as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Michael's bio, my bio both indicated we spent some time in higher ed over 12 years. And, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is compliance knowledge, internal trainings, being able to track for tenure, things like that are essential, right, for a faculty member or a support staff to be able to leverage year after year. They're constantly wanting to have you go through these types of different programs or showcase, like maybe you're up for a promotion and you want to be able to showcase that you've put in extra work toward a specific skill set. There's all sorts of ways that these professional development type pathways could be leveraged, and it's beneficial for the end faculty member or support staff, but it's also beneficial for the end organization because they're doing what you want them to do, plus you're able to track it in a meaningful way without having to worry about spreadsheets and all sorts of other things. It's a very visual way to see where your folks are at. So yeah, I think it's pretty powerful.
Thank you, Jason. I'm just answering some questions here that are coming in. One question came in, can you share this via social media? Absolutely, where we showed the previous slide where every student gets a backpack. It's kind of your own portfolio of all the badges you've earned. And it doesn't have to be just from the one institution you attended. You can bring them in anywhere, right? We have an open badge standard. We actually serve on the board of One Ed Tech, which is driving the global vision for open badging and credentialing and global learning. And so the idea behind this is the student can take any one of those credentials, curate them to whatever menu offering they want to show to an employer so they can select the badges they want to share and be able to export that, share on LinkedIn, put it on their social media feed, be able to upload that to a website. Very easy to do.
And I think before we even go any further, Michael, it might be really impactful to hear, and I don't have a visual to show you because I think we're early days, but imagine a world where you have your credentials in your backpack and, you know, Canvas Credentials is hooked into the labor market and you're able to actually see jobs that you might be a good fit for potentially, right? Where it says, hey, look, based on the skills you have in your digital backpack or your CLR, you're an 86% match for these particular positions. You should go out and take a look at these, or better yet, here are the skills that you're missing that these particular jobs are looking for that you don't have. Here's the coursework that could potentially shorten up that distance from 86 to 98 or 100%, right? So we really want to be thinking future. When we showed you those backpack images, that's today future thing, but we are very much looking toward the future of how can we take this thing to the next level with the end goal in mind of folks being able to, you know, look at end employment and get positions where they want to be. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we moved on, because I think it's a really important piece.
Jason, thank you. So we're now coming up on the last two areas, right? Sky's the limit and catch me if you can. How are institutions launching success initiatives? And I think all of this, everything we've talked about is great, right? We want to issue credentials. We want to be able to tie them to our courses. We want to map learner journey, and we want to be able to do it in a meaningful and impactful way. We're able to extrapolate data, support our institutional goals. But how do we do that, right? And that really becomes a question. Well, we've actually worked on our solution. We have a team designated to doing this. We've come up with a plan, and we have a strategy, a stepladder of sorts that is going to allow us to really envision the process of how you create a credentialing initiative at your institution. Many of you shared you're at the early stages. Jason's just quickly going to walk us through what these phases are. We'll go through each one of them with a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I love this graphic just because it's like, well, now I have another piece of software on campus. Now, what do I do with it? And so we like to take a really thoughtful approach to things. And as you can kind of see it outlined here, we really start at the bottom here and work our way through the different aspects. So we'll start kind of thinking about what is our missions and our goal, and what are the things that we have to do from a planning standpoint before we even roll this thing out. So it all starts with mission, vision, and goals. And Michael, feel free to kind of go into that next slide, right? And this is where we have to talk about, why are we doing this? Why are we issuing the badges? What are the values? You know, we've talked about it at nauseum during this presentation. It's a lot about self-advocacy, right? Being able to make yourself more marketable, being able to showcase the different skills that you've earned, and help you as an organization measure success. So I think when you think about kind of benchmarking and identifying performance-based of engagement, like, you have to think about all the different ways that this credentialing platform could potentially impact your institution right from the get-go. And as we go through this, Michael, feel free to go ahead and click through or add. You know, we're not saying that everybody's got it all figured out, but you definitely need to put some guardrails. For those folks that I was looking at the chart that said, hey, we haven't started yet, or we're at the beginning stages, I would really encourage you to think about putting in a governance policy of who's going to be issuing, how that program is going to be rolling out is really, really critical. Are you going to have a committee that approves things? Are you going to have, you know, different steps and different phases that folks are going to have to submit a request through? You have to kind of think through all of that. And I think rolling a platform out just to say that we have a credentialing platform would be kind of a miss. So I would encourage you to strongly think about what are those pieces and parts of a governance strategy that makes sense for you all. And we have an entire team, as Michael mentioned, that can help you with all of this should you need it, right? What we see a lot, right, because our particular credentialing platform allows for you to actually map to the hierarchy, right? So you could have your larger organizational platform, and then underneath that, you can have issuers that map either to your department or maybe to different partnerships, business units. All of those types of areas you can map to and make sure that everybody that needs access has access, but it's all controlled from the central kind of strategy, right? It's not being used just kind of like the wild, wild west of badges where everybody just gets to do whatever they want. There's real thought behind what you're doing here. And it really comes down to the meat and potatoes behind those badges, right? Is it meaningful to share a badge that has no metadata to it, right? Just an image. If you just look at a badge on LinkedIn of somebody that earned something and it doesn't have any earning criteria, think about what that says to the market, right? So you want to make sure that you have actual rigor behind the badges. And so you're looking at your skills, you're looking at your standards and thinking through what that means. Are they tied to the competencies of your program? What does it really mean to earn that credential? And I think a lot of folks, unfortunately, kind of skip this step. And this is a really, really important piece of that stair step graphic that we showed. This piece is paramount, because without it, you're kind of doing it an injustice, right? So we can keep on cruising there, Michael. Look, if I've learned nothing from spending time in higher ed, it was that people need to be informed and people need to be trained. And if you're going to roll out a credentialing strategy or a plan, you need to do it in a way that brings people together and gives people a voice to kind of understand why they are doing this and put together this kind of strategic communication plan that wraps around how are we going to enable our faculty? How are we going to enable our students to understand when they earn a credential, what does that mean? Why should faculty get on board with this? Why should anybody want to actually earn these credentials? You have to show the why, the benefit to the learners and to the folks that are issuing these. And so that takes a good bit of time as well. This is not an overnight, thing where you're just going to flip a switch and it's just going to magically happen for you. There's a lot of thought that goes into how you're going to communicate this. And then, of course, we talked a little bit about these pathways, being able to take a backwards design approach to the pathways. What's the end goal? What is the thing that we want them to earn? And then what are the steps that they need to take? And so being able to sit down and really map that out. We've seen schools do it on paper, and we've seen schools do it on whiteboards together with our team, really thinking about, all right, we have this kind of drawn out, and now we're going to start bringing in different business units, different clubs and organizations that we're going to make kind of tie-ins, because there's not just one way to earn a communication badge or a creative thinking, right? There's plenty of different ways to earn those types of those skills throughout the organization. So you have to really be thoughtful about how those all blend together in a mapping kind of design. And if you're using outcomes, right? If you're using Canvas outcomes, I would encourage you to think about, we have a partnership with eLumen, and they have a product called Insights. And what Insights does is it's basically Canvas outcomes on steroids. It allows for you to bring in your outcomes and tie credentials to them. So in this scenario, a faculty member wouldn't have to touch badging at all. It would all be done on the administrative side ahead of time, saying, all right, if these outcomes are achieved, then automatically issue this particular credential. And so all the automation in the world takes place, and there's not a need for any humans to actually touch anything from that standpoint. So it's a really appealing piece, because it's A, tying to the outcomes that you want already, and B, you're not asking faculty to have to do anything else in a process, right? Or being on board with anything, because it's just happening automatically. So it's just something, if you're really heavy into the outcomes inside of Canvas, I would consider talking to us about what Insights can do for you, because I think it would really unlock some potential for you.
Thank you, Jason. So
Sure.
we've given you a lot. We thank you all for sticking with us so far. We're in the last leg, and before you really get jet lagged, let's kind of talk about what's happening in the market. How are institutions who have adopted credentialing solutions managing them? How are they putting them out there in the world? One of the ways they're doing it is with Canvas Catalog. It's our own Canvas's online learning marketplace where you can go out and you can create course offerings that are really easy for students to navigate, to be able to make a purchase, complete it. You could track their progress, issue a certificate, but also give them a badge of earning, right? Validate that credential of achievement. And so that's one way that schools are doing that. They're creating quick access points without creating this traditional process of going through admissions. So that's one way that's happening. So here's an example, right? So believe it or not, drones are very popular. It's a very popular area of interest. Depending on different regions of the world, different programs are offered, ski instructor training or CPR training or flight lessons, different things. Jason, do you want to add anything to here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, you're not wrong about the drone program. I was doing some research about this, and it's massive. It's on a 51% growth rate over the next 5 years. And so it just kind of speaks to the message that we've talked about, which is that non-traditional programs are on the rise, right? And if you think about drones in general, there's tons of applications: aerial photography, surveying, agricultural monitoring. There's tons. And so I think what you're going to start to see is schools really digging their heels in to the non-traditional market and really starting to offer up some of these programs that they didn't do previously. So I think you're going to start to see that over the course of the next year or two.
Awesome. All right. So what have we learned from everything, right? We've learned that skill-based learning is on the rise. We know that. I think we've talked about that quite a bit. AI is continuing to take over and change the way we do business, right? It's helping to enhance learning. It's helping to enhance business services. 375 million people are going to need some level of global reskilling. That's a really staggering number to me, and I think it's probably more. Technology is driving every aspect of industry today, and degrees are not for everybody, right? We realize that maybe you just need to boost up your skill set. Maybe you've been in the workforce for 20 some odd years. I work with professionals all the time that don't have the time or can't afford to go back to school, but they can afford to do a certificate or a training, an upskill, and make it meaningful. The idea for schools, institutions, is to make that process seamless and easy, to remove barriers. And we do that by applying digital tools and technology to be able to drive that feature of our process. And then the market is changing, right? Institutions are competing, and one way they're competing is they're creating things like corporate agreements. There's value to employers to invest in their own employees. And so institutions need to buffer that by providing the right programs, by providing the right opportunities, right? So you come in, you build corporate partnerships or MOUs, and you deliver the training that these corporate entities want, but really can't design on their own, don't have the bandwidth or the resources to do it. Institutions are the right kind of solution point to that. And, having that kind of special elixir, knowing how to framework a course, how to work through a program, how to navigate a market, how to build value in learning are all really crucial pieces. And to the employer, they'll gladly invest because these are individuals who are going to stay with the company. They're going to see the companies investing in them. And so corporate partnerships is just another wrinkle we wanted to share with you. And then what can we do as institutions? Jason, maybe you can elevate a little bit or evaluate some of these bullet points here as we wrap up.
Yeah, I'm reading through the Q&A as well, which has been phenomenal that you guys are asking so many great questions. And some of it ties to this slide, like what can we do as an institution? What is it that we can do immediately? Well, we kind of talked about it on a couple of those slides, right? Think about the data and the skills and the competencies that you actually want to, provide credentials for. It may be that you don't issue credentials for everything. It could be very a niche item, right, that you're going to start with and not have to do every little thing. I think that's something that institutions get a little bit bogged down with a little bit. They feel kind of compelled to roll this out all at one time without having everything thought through. And so if I could give you a piece of advice about what you can do right here, is that start with a vision of one program or two programs if you need to start that small, and work through what that would look like and take that scalability across to the rest of it. Really, once you get a couple folks, departments, and folks working underneath you, I think you're going to see that it kind of snowballs, right? Once you see one department kind of really rolling, most of the time we see, well, how do I do that? How do I get involved with that? And that's when the gears kind of get really spinning. So just be really thoughtful about the different skills and competencies that you're planning on issuing.
Yeah, Jason, thank you. I'm going to kind of summarize a little bit of everything we just said and really wrap up our presentation here. And then, so I want to just identify kind of these key factors of why badging is important, right? And mapping the learner journey, right? You see the progress of somebody's potential. You're providing them a verified credential they can take with them to industry, and actually is backed up by the institution, by the brand of the institution. And then I think what's really important is that that brand and that verified credential is tied to some kind of metadata, assessment, assurance of learning goals, outcomes, right? eLumen comes into that. So our solution, our Canvas credential solution, can help kind of manifest all of those realities for you. And we're happy to talk to you about it. Kind of wrapping up here, Jason, do you want to just take us out here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, if you would like to have a demo of Canvas credentials to kind of see what more we can accomplish together, we'd love to have that conversation. You can scan the QR code. The last thing I really want to leave you with is thinking about scale. Whenever you're evaluating, there was a lot of folks from that beginning opening poll that were at the early stages. Over half of this audience was at the early stages. Think about scalability and make sure that it works for what you want it to work with, as far as, can I roll this program out in a meaningful way? Does it support course copy? Does it support blueprinting? All of those things, those manual touch points. Can I issue badges off of course completion? It's a little teaser. I want you to think about those different items as you're evaluating. What are the things that are going to make your life easier and your faculty's life easier from an issuing standpoint? So just think about that. And yeah, we'd love to have more conversations for sure.
All right. And we did not practice as Jason, ready to infinity and beyond. So, thank you everybody for joining us. Kevin, thank you for having us. We hope provided you value and information. We'd love to show you our solution and tool. It's got a lot of great features. It's really where the market is going. We'll connect you to the right folks. And really, it's just about having a conversation on campus, right, to really start that journey. And really value everybody's time, and look forward to kind of sharing this information.
Yeah, well, thank you both, gentlemen. It was just a really jam-packed conversation there with a lot of information. I saw you both deserve badges for your adept use of the Zoom platform here. A lot of questions coming in that you were handling right as you're going through the presentation. I think our audience really appreciates that. There are a couple questions. We still have a few minutes left here. Maybe I'll throw at you. You guys were great in terms of talking about the big picture, but maybe we get a little bit nitty-gritty about how you would say Instructure's credentialing tools differentiate from some others that are out there on the market.
Yeah, Jason, maybe I'll take like the first part, and you can answer the second part.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, right, when we as a company Instructure have purchased a tool like credentialing, right, made an acquisition, it now becomes under the entire umbrella of what everything Instructure is about. So we have an entire team and vision globally pushing this initiative to support what industry is asking for. So it's not a one-off product, and that's the first piece. The second part is that pathway component that we showed you, that guided learning pathway. It falls, as Jason mentioned, into human psychology. It's part of the natural progress of learning, and it's also visible. Our badges are openly open, right? So meaning students can take them anywhere they want. And then most of all, we've built really integrated components within our product. So something like course copier, blueprinting. If you're an instructional designer, it's a nightmare manually typing in badging for each course sequence. Every time you recreate a course or copy it, you have to add badging with solutions. No, our team realized that that was a need. We made it an automated feature, and that autonomy, I think, takes precedence over the entire platform. Jason, I stole a little bit of your thunder, but I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think it's perfect, Michael. I would just lean heavily toward what we are currently building, which is, this idea of a learner passport that could encompass all of our tools and be a one-stop shop. So whether you have portfolio information, whether you have credentials, whether you have a CLR, it all lives in one central hub that you can then curate yourself, take with you after you leave an organization. And again, I talked a little bit of future stuff here, but just this idea of connecting to employers and connecting and really creating on-ramps. I think that's what's going to separate us in the market, is our ability to connect folks in a seamless way from the platform they're already using every day, right? Yeah. So.
And Jason, you had talked about, well, with the you're polling at the beginning that a large percentage of our audience here is in the early stages or haven't even kind of begun to do it. And you actually had some great information there about establishing governance policies and some other things. But if you have a vision, those audience folks are out there and they have a vision of what they want to do, but they don't know where to really start. I mean, like, what is that first step after logging out of this conversation and saying, okay, we're really going to go for it this time? What is on that to-do list for them? We'll give them the night off and then say tomorrow morning. Yeah,
it's a great question. I think getting executive leadership is going to be the key, right? If you can get someone to be an executive sponsor and really help drive that initiative, without that, we have seen it not go as smoothly because you're pushing the boulder uphill by yourself. But if you have that executive sponsorship to say, this is the plan, this is why I want to do this, this is the outcomes that I expect to have, then it usually goes quite a bit faster from all aspects, right? Because oftentimes all it takes is one person to say yes, and everything just falls into place. But without that executive sponsorship, it's a little bit tougher battle. So I would start there.
Yeah, and I'll just add
Michael,
to
any
it.
Thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think obviously anytime you're going to invest in an initiative, you have to get various audiences on top of the executive sponsorship engaged, right? Because what we've seen happen is schools will adopt credentials on a small scale. We want to try it and roll it out. And all of a sudden, every division realizes that you have this really cool toy and wants to be part of it because they're seeing the broader picture, right? Institutions are creating these initiatives, but students want them. Industry is asking for it. So, you have to have that governance strategy really built out in the right way. So, but executive sponsorship, absolutely. That's the only real way we're going to be able to get the buy-in, get the budget, right? Be able to make this happen.
Yeah. And I guess I knew the hardest part of my job here this afternoon would be to end the conversation. There's so many different aspects of this. But maybe I'll put you both on the hot seat here a little bit when you kind of look into the future of credentialing. Again, I mean, we're kind of in this moment of great transformation, right? And it doesn't seem like that's going to be stopping at any time. But when you look out on the horizon, like let's say 24 months, 72 months, where do you see the next steps happening? So for our audiences, where they need to be one step ahead, not only if they're just starting, but just be kind of thinking towards the future.
Yeah, I mean, what I see is employers, right, is the natural progression, is what they need to start thinking about and building those employer connections, because it's not going to be too far away where employers are really going to start noticing these credentials. I think we're at the beginning stages of that. And I think you're going to start to see that grow. I think ATS systems, application tracking systems, are going to start to have a way to ingest these digital credentials and really make them meaningful. And I think if you can start to build employer partners to reach out to them and say, what skills do you need? What skills are you missing when you're interviewing candidates, and pairing that with your curriculum, I think it will really help propel your credentialing platform. Michael, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I just think what you've already mentioned is really this concept of a CLR, a comprehensive learner record, right? Or a learning journey passport. You're not just thinking about this from a badge perspective, you're thinking about this from a holistic career perspective. And I think that what Jason also alluded to, badges are going to change. AI is going to change badging, right? There's going to be more recognition software. It's going to be more acknowledgement. There's going to be, I feel like dating sites have figured this out, right? That compatibility potential to some degree. I think the same thing is going to happen with careers. You hear constantly on different companies, are advertising, we match candidates to your job and all of that. But how does that really happen? And I think credentials is going to take that next level of evolution. Students are going to graduate or finish their different credentials and degrees. They don't just want to see the potential of a job. They want to be connected to a career. And that's always the mindset. I think that's one of the biggest changes. Students no longer want institutions to tell them, study this, and it will open up your horizon to these potential opportunities. They want to know what their degree is going to be in and how that's going to lead to the job that they're connected to. And that's where the market is changing. I think that's where we're going to continue to move forward. But we need to continue to get away from and get rid of those barriers that are standing in the way for student access, affordability, all those pieces.
I think the last thing I am seeing as a shift is state requirements, right? State requirements for jobs that are at that level are no longer requiring a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. Many states have adopted the fact that they have just the experience or the digital credential in order to get hired at that state level. So I think we're starting to see that. We're also starting to see states mandate digital credentials, right? So states like Florida have implemented an English 101 mandate for the digital credential has to be issued, right, for the undergrad. And so Florida was put in kind of a unique situation as they go figure it out, but I don't think we're too far away from other states following suit on some of that. And I see some questions in the chat around regional accreditation standards. I think we're not too far away from that either. I do believe that it's going in that direction.
Great. Well, I see that our time is just about up, so I'm going to wrap up the conversation here. Once again, Jason and Michael, thank you so much for a really great, enjoyable presentation, informative presentation. And really like to thank the audience members for joining in as well. That really just adds such an important component and drove our conversation here. If you have a question that was in the Q&A, we will be able to get back to you with some answers if we didn't get to it here online in person. So as a reminder, you will get an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording, along with the slides. I know a number of you are asking about the slides, and they will be passed on to you as well. Thanks again for participating, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.